Hi, this is Snoop Dogg, and you're about to see the best sports and entertainment talk show on the internet with your host, Troy Geary. The man who seems to go to every sporting event, and Dave Stevens born without legs, but won 7 Emmys and played college football and minor league baseball. Throw in Will Stein wherever Will Stein is, and you've got a heck of a show. It's the Geary, Stein, and Stevens Show. Faux shizzle.
You guys getting sick of us today on Radio Row? We have done a lot of shows, and I'm still here at Radio Row now. I got my co-host back with me, Troy Geary, who's fresh off of covering the Eagles and the Chiefs. And I've also got a former team doctor joining us to talk a little medicine and all the things that are going on concussion-wise and things in the league is joining us. First, Troy, how was the press conferences today?
Yeah, they were packed, but a lot of good questions, a lot of players excited for this game on Sunday.
All right, Dr. Chow, you have been a part of the NFL for a long, long time, former head team doctor with, I believe, the San Diego Chargers.
Correct.
So how has the league evolved as far as the protection of players now that we know so much more about head and concussions and trauma?
I'm old enough. Okay, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I was the head team physician. And so it's kind of weird that you have a sort of orthopedic surgeon, but as the head team physician, the mandatory concussion conferences and learning started during my time in the NFL. The NFL mandated things at the combines. There were special trips to a symposium with the Defense Department people studying concussions. Concussions were coming into the forefront during my time as the head team physician. I was around. Look, I was back in the day when, there was no spotters, there was no sideline video, there was no mandatory sit-outs. And quite honestly, when it all started, a player would, see stars and say, "I'm good," and almost joke about it on the sideline. And we'd say, "No, that's not good. We need to evaluate you." They're kind of like, "What are you talking about?" No, this is how it's always been this way. So it's been a lot of changes over the last couple of decades, where now it's okay to say, "Look, I've got symptoms, or I see stars." Before it was, no, you just roll with it. It was just part of the game of football.
I was going to ask you about this game. I know every week you go on Sirius and talk about injuries. So given the break from the Super
Worse for next week, and B, it's the Super Bowl. You're just going to play, and so you mentioned concussions. Gainwell has a concussion. 95% of the league clears a concussion protocol in 2 weeks. 50-50 for 1 week, so the extra week certainly helps him. And since the symptoms and the grading for return, a lot of them are subjective. I hope Gainwell has no symptoms and he clears, but even if he does, he's not likely to admit to them, right? He wants to play in this big game and go from there. So, yes, the extra week helps, but the motivation of any championship game and getting a ring helps as well.
Yeah, last night Kenneth Gainwell, because he's in protocol, did not talk to the media. I also want to ask you about an infamous story. I know you're okay to share it, about Philip Rivers. Can you share for the people that don't know that story, how he played through ACL tear?
Oh, okay. I was going to say, which Philip Rivers story? There are several Philip Rivers stories. I was like, okay, which one is this? We've had a lot of fun over here. Philip Rivers is awesome. He's lovely. He still texts me now about his high school players and what injuries and how do I get him back. And he's funny. But so if you look at my Twitter profile picture, that Pro Football Doc, ex-profile picture, not profile picture, the header, if you look at it, those in the know of the NFL will recognize the background. I'm actually walking off the field with Philip Rivers after he had torn his ACL. And if you look at the roof, you will notice the picture. It was the final game in the RCA dome. If you look at the bubble inside, you'll see on the roof that picture. And that was when he tore his ACL. We walked off. And if you remember, he was very forceful looking at the fans and jawing at them and wagging the finger. And he was getting lambasted for going at the fans. And I can promise you, Philip Rivers never swears. He did not swear there. Fans were swearing at him as I was walking next to him. And all he looked at them very forcefully in a very Philip Rivers head bobbing up and down forceful way is, "Don't you worry, I'll be back. Don't you worry, I'll be back." That's all he said that day. We get in the locker room like, "Philip, you tore your ACL." And I can say this because he's let me wave tip on him. You can't come back to this game. Billy Bullock can finish. He goes, no. Let me try. Put a brace on it. So we put a brace on it and let him try. "No, I can do this." I said, so I actually had the assistant athletic trainers with me. I go, "Take a snap under center for me." And he couldn't get down under center. And he finally said, "Okay, he's not." Then on the way home, he's literally is saying to me, "I'm playing in this next game. I'm playing in this next game." I said, "Well, let's get the MRI and let's see. We'll do everything we can. Because it's the AFC Championship game. I want to play. It's a chance to go to the Super Bowl." We land, we get the MRI, confirm the ACL meniscus tear. He wants to have a modified limited surgery to get him ready to play. I say, "Why don't you think about this? It's midnight. We'll talk in the morning." So he, Norv Turner, and I talked the next morning with the athletic trainer. Philip still wants to do the surgery and try and play. Norv Turner says, "Don't worry, Billy Bullock's got it." He ends up doing the knee scope and playing 6 days later against the Patriots with the brace on. And admittedly, he's a quarterback. And admittedly, he wasn't, I love you, Philip, but he's not the most mobile guy. It's not like he could have been a wide receiver or a running back and done that, or an AD. He was a pocket quarterback. And so he did play in that game. So.
Dr. Chow, I played in the 80s in high school and also played college football. And I just remember in those days, you bang your head. We had a coach who would take his whistle and bop us on the top of the head and hear the ear ringing. But in those days, those players said, "Hey, just patch me up, shoot me full of something, and let me get back in the game." I mean, how did you deal with those players that said, "Look, I want to play at all costs"?
Well, here's the biggest fallacy. The number one question I get asked in the media is, how did you balance your job as a team physician, working for the team and ownership, when they were trying to get force players back to play? And it was the opposite. In my experience, it was players that were saying, "You got to let me play." And the team said, "Do what you need to do and let's be safe." It was the opposite for me. I've never had management tell me to force the guy back at all. As a matter of fact, the only thing I ever said to management before was, "Look, my job is to get the best player on our team back and get the 53rd guy on our team healthy so you can cut him and replace him with somebody else. You can't cut somebody who's hurt. So don't tell me when you're about to cut somebody or whatever. I might change my, these are my friends. I'll get everyone ready, and then you make your decision. That's what you need to do." So I never had any problem with that. But it was an attitude change, because when we started saying, "Look, we need to do this concussion check," people were like, "No, it's football. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Give me some smelling salts. Let's go." It was a decade-long education to get players to understand that was important.
Yeah, we got people coming and taking the tours we ordered, so hopefully we can get them back. But Doctor, I know we got limited time with you, but what is the worst injury you have ever seen? I mean, I'm talking about a Joe Theismann type thing where you said, "Man, I don't know if I can ever get this guy back in the field."
Well, there's 2 injuries. Okay, in person, I dealt with a dislocated hip. That was pretty significant. And yes, I respect concussions, but it's always been spinal cord injuries that I would fear. And in my time, I really didn't try and spine board a lot of kids off, because even though a lot of times it was right to be cautious, that's scary for families and people watching. But the 2 scariest times that I had were actually when I started doing Pro Football Doc. The Pittsburgh linebacker, the guttural feel that I had when he lay on that turf with the spinal cord injury. Ryan Shazier. I could barely speak. I knew something was wrong the way that he rolled over and his legs flopped. Ryan Shazier, and thank God he's walking. Everything is great. Okay, he didn't play football game in the second week. And the other one was DeMar Hamlin. And during DeMar Hamlin, so you guys know I do this in-game injury stuff. We actually had a meeting in-game when it happened saying, maybe we shouldn't talk about this DeMar Hamlin injury because we don't want to be ambulance chasers. And I decided that if we don't talk about it, who would? So I thought we said a lot of things that night, including if you're going to ever collapse, there's no better place than a football field because there's 27 different medical personnel, unless you're in a hospital. And I said something else that night, too, that I think people interpreted as callous, but once they understood, they knew it wasn't. I said, I hope to God that they restart this game because I don't see how they can restart this game without in the background knowing he's okay. All players have now seen people go off on a spine board, and that's scary enough. But nobody watching, listening, has seen someone actively receiving CPR. And when it's your teammate actively having his chest pumped on, that is something you cannot unsee. That's incredibly frightening, which is why you saw the look on Josh Allen's face. You saw the look on the other players. There was no possible way that game was starting that day unless they knew that kid was okay. And so, look, I'm glad he's okay. I'm glad it all worked out fine. And the other thing that I said that night is, look, there's a reason why you're on the ambulance on the field for 30 minutes. To load him in the ambulance, you have a driver and ambulance attendants and one doctor. Leaving him on the field, you have 27 medical personnel to stabilize him. That's why they left him on the field and it took so long, because they were actually treating him at different points in time. So it all made sense, and it was a very happy ending and a great outcome. And that's some of the analysis we had looked at. I also heard a story that they let the mom into the paramedic on the way to the ambulance. And I took that as a great sign that he would be okay, because if it's truly touch and go life and death, they're not stopping to pick up anybody. You don't need a hysterical mom in the front of the cab distracting your duties. And thankfully, it ended up being okay, and now has returned to play football.
For the average fan that doesn't know, talk about a little bit behind the scenes, but how many people are actually there? The meetings that go on that helped actually save DeMar Hamlin's life that day. There's like various meetings, various people that you have to talk to, various team doctors. It's a collaborative effort, and really, there's a lot of thought behind it.
Yeah, and I'm going to say it two ways, and hopefully it makes sense. On the one hand, what the doctors and the affiliated medical staff did that night was absolutely heroic and fantastic. On the other hand, it was absolutely routine. All 30 other NFL teams would have done the exact same thing. That's how you're trained throughout your medical career. That's how you drill ahead of every season. You meet before every game. It's like literally they're all trained professionals. You can all come together and do a task at the same time. And you work all your life for this, and it's part of the training. So as fantastic as it was, I'm glad to say it was also very routine. This is just what they do.
Before we let you go, I want to bring up an injury that most people don't remember to think about. Was it a misdiagnosis? Was it? I still don't know how Bo Jackson got to Bo Jackson, where he had to have hip replacement surgery because of the injury that really, kind of killed his hip. So, could they have done something at the time to fix that if they'd have looked a little harder?
Well, I don't know because I didn't examine Bo Jackson back at that time. But believe it or not, the story makes unfortunate sense. He subluxed his hip and ended up with avascular necrosis. Avascular necrosis is lack of blood flow. Lack of bone is alive. If you don't have blood flow, it dies out. It's like if only this tree or this area of your lawn, your backyard, is only covered by one sprinkler head, and it's not really rained much where you are. When that sprinkler head goes out, that tree starts to die out, or the grass starts to die out. So I don't think it was a misdiagnosis. It was a sequela of that injury that caused the surface to die out. Now, what Bo Jackson did prove is, look at how great technology is. He returned to play professional sports after his hip replacement. But the caveat is it also didn't last very long. And this is why you don't want to go down that path. So I don't think it was misdiagnosis. It was a set of circumstances. It was the same thing that we talked about at Sports Injury Central related to Tua Tagovailoa. And it does seem Tua's past that, right? It's not that worry. But initially, there was that worry over the next year or two, but he's past that.
All right, doctor, you're an unusual doctor because you do so much social media. People can follow you and watch you and see you. So tell our fans out there how to watch you. Give the updates and the medical information that you do.
Through Twitter or X at Pro Football Doc or at SIC-Score, SIC-Score. Sports Injury Central is at SICScore.com. And one thing I try to do is I try not to use a lot of medical terminology. I want to use football terms and everyday terms to relate to fans and for people to understand. Yes, I threw out avascular necrosis, but I also went sprinkler head. Right?
So, I got a question because it's always bothered me. You know, I was born without legs, yet they call me a congenital amputee. But the amputee term means you had to have something cut off. So is there a better term or phrase or limb different? I don't know. I've always wondered. It's misleading in a way because congenital means born with, but you're not born with an amputation.
You know, I'm not a pediatric orthopedist, and this might show both of our age a little bit. I'm not sure they use that term anymore. It might be congenital limb deficient, right? That would be a little more accurate than congenital amputee.
Or freak of nature, right?
Freak of nature. Okay, freak of nature. We like that. I like that. Freak of nature. Well, there's all sorts of things. Since the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, I'll ask this question. Maybe you guys. The Chiefs are in the AFC West. I used to ask this question all the time. We went there every year. So Kansas City is in what state? Missouri. And it's called Kansas City because it's next to Kansas on the border. But you cross the river, and we've stayed there before, in Kansas City on the Kansas side. Why is it called Kansas City, Kansas, not Missouri City, Kansas?
That makes sense. They have two Kansas City, Kansas. Yeah.
There's Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. Why isn't it Kansas City, Missouri, and Missouri City, Kansas? Probably the same reason the congenital amputee. So we've caused more confusion than we've solved here.
All right, doctor, before you go, you're wearing red, so are you rooting for the Chiefs, given it's an old AFC?
Oh, it's red as in blood in Sports Injury Central. Okay. But my 12-year-old son, what little boy is not a Patrick Mahomes fan? So he's been a Patrick Mahomes fan for years. I took him to the Super Bowl in Arizona against the Eagles, right? Because he wanted to go, see Patrick Mahomes, and it was close. So he flew out unaccompanied minor. I took him. He had to buy tickets, and he was so excited when they won. And this time, thankfully, he goes, "Yeah, this Super Bowl's boring. They've played each other before." And I'm like, and I didn't correct him why that's not the case. I just went with, "Thank you. Just saved me $5,000 a ticket."
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, no problem, son. I'll fly home and we'll watch the game together.
There you go.
Troy learned that hard lesson yesterday by accidentally touching an app, and he had to buy 2 Super Bowl tickets.
Yeah, I was going to go anyways, but, it happens, right?
Doctor, God bless you, and thank you for spending a little time with us and giving us some insight. And I do appreciate the league has made good changes, and they're changing the way that we see this game. And hopefully, years down the road, there are even more safety things and protocols that are put in place as these athletes get bigger, faster, stronger. Those collisions are a lot bigger, faster, stronger.
Well, and I've never been interviewed by a freak of nature before.
There you go. All right. Thanks for joining us here on Radio Row. Gary, Stan, and Stevens. It's good to have Troy back. We're going to come back in a little bit. You never know who's going to walk by. We could have a doctor. We could have a cute nurse. You never know what's going to happen here on the Gary, Stein, and Stevens Show. Stay with us.